The House Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fitzgerald.
Here.
Representatives Burns.
Here.
Shannon.
Present.
Breen. Rogers.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Pies.
Present.
Zorn. Buckhead.
Here.
Guzat. Bagol.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 11 members. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I believe we have a couple of members who are coming from committees who may have just let out. Busy day here in Lansing. With that, I do need an approval, a motion to approve and adopt the minutes from our previous meeting, which was on October 25th. That motion was made by Representative Rogers, and seeing no objection, the minutes will stand approved. We did post and have note that we would be taking up House Bill 4866 today. That will not be the case. We do have one item before us, though. We do have Senate Bill 480, a Senator Hertel bill that would amend the Charter Township Act. Excuse me. That is incorrect. We got a duplicate up here. I'm just trying to stick to the script today. We have a Senator Hertel bill today that would have to deal with zoning and plotting. So we actually have today staff from Senator Hertel's office with us today to come up. And while you're coming up, I'll just give a little bit of background. This bill did pass out of the Senate on November the 8th, 2023. We do have Keith, I'm going to struggle with this, Pionk?
Pionk, very good.
Pionk from KMPO Realty joining the Senator's staff today. So I'll let you, the two of you today, begin testimony, and thank you very much for being here.
Great, thank you, Chair Fitzgerald, members of the committee here. My name is Matt Black. I'm Senator Hertel's chief of staff. He's stuck in appropriations presentation right now. So thanks for taking the time to take up Senate Bill 480. This bill would increase the number of parcels that the first 10 acres of a parent parcel could divide into from 4 to 20. And it allows municipalities to authorize further partitioning if necessary and meets all the standards of that local municipality. This will continue to let local governments establish their own ordinances and governing splits, allowing them to create stronger protections in place for those communities. This does affect only the division of land. It does not impact the buildability of those lots. Any construction would still be subject to zoning requirements under all of those local ordinances. And this policy would lead to more affordable housing options and reduce urban sprawl by creating more buildable lots in populated areas. And from there, I'm going to give it over to Keith to cover the rest.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time I'm allotted to talk to you guys. I brought this item up with Senator Hertel about a year ago, and after talking a long time about it, he decided to take it and bring it through the Senate, and now obviously it's with you guys. I have a couple illustrations. What this bill would do is allow this is a particular piece of property. It's a 5-acre parcel that was purchased. Actually, I purchased it, and the law allows me to do 4 splits. Now, once I do 4 splits, basically there's 2 roads. This is a road here, and this is a road here. So I get these two are lots that are contiguous to other properties, and they're about the same size as those. These other 2 parcels now are not splittable because of the Land Division Act, how it's presently written. If you look at a larger picture, everything to the north over here is all 65 by 120 foot lots. They're all high density subdivision lots. It's just the way that it is in Chesterfield. These are all starting to be larger lots anyway, but with the ordinance or with the Land Division Act as it's written right now, it will not allow any further splits. So this will allow us to take parcels similar to this and this piece and make more individual lots sizable to the area that are congruent with the area, and be able to bring them to market at a much lower price than if we had to take a raw piece of land and develop it, because right now that's extremely expensive if anybody's in that business. So this will also afford a lot of different parcels out there right now. If you drive down the street and you'll see a house with a large lot, the reason most likely is because they've taken their splits off that property and they can't get any more splits. So this will afford the opportunity to divide parcels that exist today that were not able to be split until this revision.
Mr. Pionk, I actually have a question for you then.
Yes, sir.
So under this bill, this would go from 4 splits to 20.
As long as it meets all the ordinance requirements. For example, on this piece, although you get 20 splits according to the new Land Division Act, it only will accommodate 10 splits and meet all the ordinances.
Okay.
So that's all you're going to get.
That's what I wanted to ask about this specific illustration since it is before us.
That's correct.
Thank
So-
you.
So you wouldn't get more than you could possibly get meeting all the local ordinances and zoning requirements.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the group in front of us today? We actually have a number of cards wishing to speak today, so I believe that there will be ample opportunity to speak with others looking to speak in both support and opposition to the bill. I have Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hello.
So this sounds like it was pertaining to you, so I'm wondering if you purchased the property then with the intent of having more splits?
No,
Or why now?
So the history was basically I've done several of these types of parcels over the last 30 years, and every time I get a parcel, we end up in a lawsuit to get it split because the local assessors look at this thing through a straw, and I guess that's their privy. But I've been personally involved in 3 different lawsuits to try to get property split, and got the thing split because the present act is very restrictive, and the township assessors feel like their hands are tied in any type of flexibility. So I don't know if does
So
that answer your question, ma'am?
Not quite. It leads to another question then. So your interest then is to avoid lawsuits in the future? And I didn't understand what you meant that the assessors look through things through a straw, because it seems to me they're actually just looking at the state law.
Well, and I guess that's why we ended up in lawsuits. You know, we had different opinions what the state law said. It's an interpretation of the law. So that's what ended up putting us in court. So,
And this would affect your personal property.
This would affect one of my personal properties, but this is not only for me personally. I could bring illustrations to the committee of dozens of properties the same way that I've dealt with. I've been selling real estate for 40 years and specialize in land division and land for clients, and this comes up on a very regular basis. And basically, the act is very restrictive and not allow, the adequate partition of property.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think your example may be reflective of the experience of some others throughout the state, and thus you have intimate knowledge of this specific project here.
That's correct.
Thank you. Representative Preston.
Thank you. So I guess my biggest question is, why stop at 20 if it fulfills all of the zoning requirements and all of the setbacks that are required? Are there instances? Where did 20 come from? I could see you needing a higher number to divide than 20 on certain parcels. So where did 20 come from?
I can't speak personally about that. That 20 came up through the bill that went through the Senate, and I think a couple people are going to speak behind me. They came up with that number. Okay. So I can't speak about that number.
And if that's not answered through the rest of the testimony, I can follow up with that answer with your office.
Okay.
I'm sure that may be addressed here. Seeing no other questions for the two of you at the moment, I'll move on here. We do have a few cards of people wishing to speak today. I'll first bring up Brad Ward from the Michigan Realtors, wishing to speak in support of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Brad Ward with the Michigan Realtors. I brought with me David Pearson, who is a development attorney here in Michigan. we have a housing shortage in Michigan. I wish I could tell you that there was one piece of legislation that we could pass that would solve the shortage and we would have a ton of homes tomorrow. There isn't. And so we have to continuously find avenues and tools to put in the hands of local governments, private developers, nonprofit developers, anyone who's willing to build homes here in Michigan. We bring you a solution that is not reliant on money, not reliant on changing local zoning ordinances, but focuses in on the Land Division Act. It may be appropriate for some communities. It may be completely disinterested for other communities. But basically what we're bringing you is a bill that does have statewide applicability that would address a situation where you could divide land into quarter-acre lots to create density and shared land cost and pass those, do it quickly outside of the Platting Act, outside of the Site Condominium Act, and pass that savings along to people who are buying those homes in terms of tens of thousands of dollars of savings. This particular bill really does two things, and Senator Hertel's staff did a great job of highlighting that. One, we deal with the initial splits, the 10 acres, taking that formula from 4 splits for the first 10 acres to 20. And then the second piece, subsection 6 there, allows local governments to even look at further splits of land that has already been apportioned to allow for them to determine if situations are correct, to grant further splits. The other thing I think the chair pointed out, as well as some of the other speakers, buildability is a separate question. Land Division Act only deals with your ability to divide the land. If we want to talk about setbacks, if we want to talk about local zoning, lot size minimums, things like that, local ordinances still control. This bill does not change that. It only deals with your ability to divide the land. So like I said, it may work for some communities to do this. It may not work for others. But it is something that we support as an association, and we believe applies not only in Mr. Pyonk's situation in Chesterfield, but all across the state of Michigan. With that, I'll turn it over to David for anything else.
I don't know that I have much to add other than to point out the specific provisions that are already there. So Section 109 already provides, and I've repeated this many times over the last 20-some years, approval of a division is not a determination that the resulting parcels comply with other ordinances or regulations. That's clear. And then, and this is germane to today's discussion where we're talking about smaller lot sizes. And the genesis of 20 divisions is frankly taking, actually Mr. Pyonk's case in particular, the lots around him were zoned to permit quarter-acre lots. So if you took 5 acres, you could turn it into 20. Now, that doesn't necessarily work out when you actually put in utilities, when you provide access and all the rest. It's sort of a formula, but it at least in terms of saying what could you do, the answer is you could do, even just with a division, you could do quarter-acre lots. When you get to smaller lots, one of the concerns when the Land Division Act was adopted in 1997 is that Eagle was looking and local health departments were looking at changes to septic regulation. And in particular, where you could use a mound system, where you could use different things. And there was a concern that that be addressed specifically when you get down to 1-acre lots. There is a separate specific section, 109A, that was added to address lots less than 1 acre. And it goes through and, among other things, in fact, says that the approving authority has no liability in approving the division of those lots. It's a reminder, and there's a specific disclaimer when it is approved to let whoever's getting the approval know that they have to have approved, either they have to have public sewer or they have to have an approved system in order to provide sewage disposal. Some of those approvals, by the way, just to hit one more thing this doesn't do, include recorded restrictions. So, for example, a well may be approved, but it is conditioned upon there being 200 feet area within which no structure can be built. And it's required that before you install that well, you have to record that restriction. That recorded restriction stays with the land. So I couldn't build my house, put in the well, and then sell off my long backyard and let somebody build a structure there. When the title work is done for them to purchase that land, the restriction is going to show up, and they'll know I could buy this, but I can't build the house I want to build because of the area that's required to be clear. So, as has been described, this allows the creation of parcels. It doesn't allow their development. And frankly, representing developers, it's usual people sell land leaving the zoning alone. They expect the developer to come in, buy something that has very large lot requirement, and apply for the rezoning. So I may, as a developer, buy property which is zoned for 10-acre lots. I can't actually build houses, develop them, and make money if that's what the zoning is. My buying it or entering into a purchase agreement is going to be premised upon my being able to convince the local government that 1-acre lots make sense, or something in between. But unless I get that rezoning, I've got 40 acres of land I can't do anything with other than divide it into 4 pieces. So again, that background has to be kept in mind, and that's the sense to this.
Thank you. So I have a question for you, Brad. Thank you so much for coming to testify today as well. You know, you talk about the need for housing in the state of Michigan. You know, we recognize that. I actually listened this morning to the radio on the way in saying that what happened, you know, if our population has remained pretty steady, what happened to this, you know, the housing stock that we have, recognizing that we almost had 4.5 people in a house a couple decades ago, and now we have just over 2 per household or per residence in the state of Michigan. So that is contributing to this discussion about the need for housing. Do you see that developers are trying to become more creative with the housing types that they are implementing here in the state? I know that my local municipality went through a master planning process, recognizing that there was a need for, yes, rented residences like condos, townhomes, apartments, but also for potentially smaller or what some might call more manageable owned properties like tiny homes. I know there is, you know, literally tiny homes. We're not talking modular per se, but tiny homes. Can you share what you know, the realtor's perspective is about what these home types are kind of being implemented, how these home types are being implemented? Is there an interest and an appetite for the market?
Yeah, you know, developers will develop what the market demands, what people are looking for, but they also have to play within the realm of local regulations. So local regulation may say that you can't have tiny homes, that a home size is a standard minimum, a lot size is a standard minimum. That comes down to local zoning. But, you know, any kind of housing that we can build up and down that spectrum of affordability helps ease the pressure on the current market, providing more housing types, more options for people, more options for developers. I think only alleviates a lot of the pressures that we are seeing. So this bill, again, doesn't solve all of that. It's one of the pieces of it, but I think, yes, we're starting to see more acceptance of, you know, kind of outside of the large single family McMansion, I guess, that we all kind of are used to seeing pop up. But again, it's got to make sense for, you know, the profitability of being able to make, you know, some money off of it.
Right. There's always the economics of it. My question then would be, across the spectrum then, is there, if you will, a standardization or a standard number that you would see in local ordinances as it pertains to both lot size and minimum home size? Do we see any type of, if you will, general rule?
Only that it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So when you go to zoning ordinances as they existed in the 50s and 60s, the lot sizes are very much smaller. And so through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and since 2000, they only get bigger. And so what we're hoping is that trend will go the other way, particularly when you're close to denser areas and infill development. And that's much of the sort of thing that this bill addresses. And part of it is that the economics make platting impossible. It takes 2 to 3 years just to get it approved. Condominiums are complicated. So our hope is that that will start to come down. But certainly the 2 to 5 acre minimum over the last 10 years has spread, unfortunately.
Okay. I have a question from Representative Hill.
Thank you. This is a really important conversation about housing. It's no doubt that housing is the number one issue in my district, way up in the Upper Peninsula, where we have communities that were developed in the 1800s. So we have Platts and Marquette. We've been dealing with a whole manner of lot sizes in our zoning. We just went through our master plan process. And we are allowing accessory dwelling units. So the idea that you can build a second structure on a lot. Now, I just wonder, that's a local zoning change, which this is not. I'm clear on that. But I think I'm interested in this tool to break it into a parcel versus allowing someone to build on a unit, build another structure on the piece of property. Can you just talk about that strategically in addressing our housing issues?
And I think this does address that issue to a degree, although, as you know, when you're dealing with a platted area, that's another set of rules. But apart from the ADU, what this would permit is that if I have an oversized lot, or what wasn't, but I would now consider an oversized lot, and it's not platted, or there are separate rules for plats, I could divide it, and that would be a place for another home to be built. So the fact is that while your zoning is permitting additional structures to be built or to be added to, in order to add to the housing, by the same token, by permitting a smaller lot size, you may permit splitting off the other piece, so it's not simply an accessory dwelling unit, but is an independent one. If I move my mother into an accessory dwelling unit, when she's gone, it may be that I'm perfectly fine now with having that structure next to me, and I wouldn't mind selling it off. This would make that possible. Right.
Seeing no other questions from the committee, we'll dismiss you two. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we get too far, I did notice that Senator Hertel joined us. Is there anything that you'd like to add at this point, or? Perfect. As we work through the cards here, then, if we have questions that do come your way, we'll bring you up. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move forward then. I have Brett Hollinsworth with the Michigan Society of Professional Surveyors here today to speak in opposition to the bill. We'd love to have you join us here, and you may begin when you're ready.
Hello, representatives, and thank you for having us here to discuss Senate Bill 480. My name is Brett Hollinsworth. I am a civil engineer and land surveyor with my Michigan Professional Engineer and Professional Surveyor's license from Livingston County, where I live and work. I currently serve as the president of the Michigan Society of Professional Surveyors, or MSPS, and I represent MSPS on a joint committee for Architects, Engineers, and Surveyors, AESLC. MSPS, together with AESLC, have raised concerns about Senate Bill 480 and the changes it proposes. The concerns generally involve the unintended consequences of this bill, which are lack of local, municipal, county, and state oversight, damage to the environment, insufficient infrastructure, and threat to health, safety, and welfare of the public, specifically as it relates to residential development. As we've heard, sections 108 through 109 define the requirements for utilizing a land division application and set limits on the number of parcels that can be created based on the size of the parent parcel. Currently, the first 10 acres get 4 parcels. realistically, a 200-acre parcel could create about 20 parcels, plus there's some additional exempt splits that are possible depending on the configuration of the land. Within Section 109, that describes the requirements of a land division application and the criteria for review of the divided parcels. The review criteria are minimal, limiting the reasons for rejecting a division to minimum parcel size, frontage or parcel width, and the width to depth ratio, as well as accessibility. And the reviews are required to be completed within 45 days in an approval or rejection issued. I will stress again, this review and approval process is minimal, whereby there are no other approvals allowed or required by other agencies. Some communities do not require a survey be made, and there are no requirements within the section for due diligence of easements, land restrictions, or existing conditions of the property. A land division application effectively circumvents requirements for accurately and precisely surveying, mapping, describing, and recording of parcels, along with the easements and restrictions necessary when creating high-density or high-volume developments. The concerns with Senate Bill 480 are primarily with the change in Section 108, subsection 2, from 4 parcels to in the first 10 acres to the 20 parcels in the first 10 acres. I mentioned previously a 200-acre parent parcel could create about 20 parcels. We understand the goal of this bill is to allow for the creation of residential parcels in a relatively fast and affordable way. However, with this change, it ultimately degrades the ability of local communities and governments, counties, and the state from having a say in the configuration of land, configuration and the development of land, preservation of land records, procurement of infrastructure improvements needed to serve those developments, and ultimately burdens the public and the new parcel owners with the costs to support them. It is important to note that there is no guarantee a resultant parcel would be buildable, and Section 109, subsection 6 specifically states approval does not mean that a parcel complies with other ordinances or regulations. Splitting by using sections 108 through 109B lacks a comprehensive site plan review process, creating of development plans, and recording of land records, which the plating portion of the Land Division Act and the Condominium Act provides. It is for these reasons that the number of divisions is so limited. Without an appropriate level of oversight from local government and the related agencies, new parcels may not be buildable or sustainable. Without a comprehensive site plan review, there is a potential to miss critical aspects such as traffic impact assessments, environmental considerations, and community development goals. Approvals for driveways, improvements to public and private roads, installation of critical infrastructure, extension of utilities, viability of well and septic systems, stormwater control and management ordinances, wetland and floodplain modifications, impacts on lakes, streams, critical dunes, high-risk erosion areas, vegetation, and endangered species are all considerations that could be circumvented by the developer and passed on to the buyers. The result will be poorly planned and executed developments, along with the related hardships for municipalities, buyers, and many other related agencies. Because of the limitation on the number of parcels that can be created using a land division application, it currently forces developers to use one of the other methods to create parcels, and that is platting or using the Land Division Act or the Condominium Act. Both of these methods do require an appropriate level of oversight. With platting, the parcels are not created until the development satisfies the requirements of all the jurisdictions having authority. But the ultimate result is a well-planned and executed development that ensures parcels are buildable and will support the intended use. We've been asked what other states require and may provide, which it may provide some valuable insight to us. Ohio allows minor subdivisions for resulting parcels that are less than 5 acres, where a parcel can be split up to 4 times and create 5 total parcels. This requires approvals from other agencies having jurisdiction. Beyond that, a major subdivision is required. Indiana's subdivision control ordinances occur at the county level. Each county has their own requirements. Some include administrative splits that are limited to a small number of parcels, often limited by the existing conditions of those parcels. Beyond that, minor and major subdivisions are required. Wisconsin follows similarly to Ohio and Indiana. By using certified survey maps, no more than 4 parcels can be created. Furthermore, in Wisconsin, a community with an established planning agency and ordinance may use certified surveys to create more than 4 parcels if the land is zoned commercial, industrial, or mixed use, not residential. So if you ask me, how is Michigan different? Well, we are far more relaxed already than our neighbors. Not just on the number of divisions, but the review and approval process and requirements, including surveying of the parcels being split and created. Who are we serving by changing the base number of parcels from 4 to 20 while not including any safeguards for communities, the environment, and home buyers? With this bill, there is also the addition of what is subsection 6 of section 108, and that would allow jurisdictions having authority to adopt an ordinance to approve additional splits section 108 allows. I wish I could say this, I see no issue with this, but local municipalities may not be the only ones with interest in large developments. And as I've outlined, more complicated than just creating a parcel and selling it. If I could provide any recommendation to how this section could be improved, it would be to simply look at the requirements of the preliminary plat process within the Land Division Act. I strongly recommend we take a step back from the bill as currently written. I will agree that the platting process for the Land Division Act and the Condominium Act are not perfect and have their own flaws. So instead, let's get the relevant parties together and represent developers, realtors, local and county agencies, health departments, Eagle, the drain commissioners, road commissioners, MDOT, utility providers, engineers, surveyors, architects, planners, and zoning officials to do the right thing for everyone and not what's right for one person. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I would like to just begin by asking, you talk about infrastructure stress, right? Yes, physical, municipal infrastructure, natural resources as well. But if you go from 4 divisions to 5 divisions, you've gone up 25%, right? You've already increased, that stress on any infrastructure by that amount. So I guess my question to you is, in your mind, is there any increase in currently allowable splits that would be acceptable to quell some of your listed concerns?
Right now, I would say no.
4 is it?
4 is that we allow more on when you get above 10, and that's above 10 acres. And there's a 10-acre parcel is really the smaller parcels. That's, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not sure that this question is for you or not, but it was said earlier that Eagle had a part in these changes in 1997, I believe, and that it was due in part to septic concerns. So I'm wondering if this change then applies again to septics, or is that in good part why you don't want it changed?
It does partly have an interest in how the septic fields have changed. So when you look at if you took a parcel currently and used a land division application and split off several 1-acre parcels, which is the minimum that's allowed, those wouldn't require a pre-approval from the local health departments. So you wouldn't be sure if you would have an actual buildable lot based on the soil types or what kind of system would be required. Whereas if you're using the Condominium Act or the platting process in the Land Division Act, those do have a section that requires those lots or units that are not served by sanitary sewer, that they be approved by the health department first. And so that will go through a testing process on the lots to check and see what sort of systems would be allowed. So, yeah.
Oh.
There's also, as I'll add to that, when you're doing the land division, the platting processes with Land Division Act and Condominium Act, there's a lot of other factors that show up in there with wetlands and floodplains and other environmental concerns. Those do show up on the map and on the development plans. Whereas with a land division application, those things are not considered. So you could potentially buy a lot a 1 acre lot and think I've got a full acre, I can do whatever I want. You could buy a 5 acre lot, but it could be completely contained in the floodplain. It could be completely contained, within wetlands, and you couldn't build on it without going through very extensive permitting processes through Eagle.
Okay, so if we were to decide to go through with something like this, it sounds then that you're saying that there would need to be other changes or changes in other laws or perhaps amendments,
And that's
some to strengthen the argument for making.
And that's
allowing this?
that's essentially why I would say leave the 4 where it is. That serves a very specific purpose in some communities. I could give you a great example. If someone owned 80 acres and they had their farmhouse on it and they wanted to split that off because they were going to sell the property to the neighbor or whatever, but they wanted to keep the house. That's a great situation for where this is at. They don't need to go through an extensive development process to split off where their house is, or if they wanted to generate a couple parcels for their kids. That's a great scenario for where the 4 parcels in the first 10 acres comes in, and then you get more based on the additional acreage you have. But if I think they were looking at a great opportunity with that subsection 6, with allowing municipalities to have more control over that and more oversight and allow additional splits. But I think there needs to be additional language in there that would make sure that we're looking at some of these other agencies with the environmental concerns and with road commissions and things like that. You get into a lot of situations where these developments could be built along our county roads, and if the county isn't a member at the table, they don't get any say in it.
So with that, we're going to move along. I do have one more question for you, Mr. Hollingsworth. Representative Hill?
Right. I think that the question that Rep. Paez was similar enough. We can move on, and really appreciate that. I might follow up as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, thank you very much, Mr. Hollingsworth, for joining us today. I do have, we're going to have to print new cards for the Michigan Townships Association, because it seems like we always create our own box here. I have Judy Allen with Michigan Townships wishing to speak with concerns. So please share those concerns with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I will agree with a lot of the testimony that's been given in terms of we do need more affordable housing in this state. And I also would agree that the Platt Act is very difficult, cumbersome, and lengthy for people to get through. So those two on the table. But however, I will say Senate Bill 480 creates another type of development in addition to what exists under those two processes right now. And it eliminates the need to use them, and it would simply allow the splits. As you've heard, it's regardless of whether or not they're buildable. So when Senate Bill 480 was introduced, we opposed it, and we went to speak with the bill sponsor, and we wanted to work to resolve the issue that was presented, and Mr. Pyank's case was the one that was presented that you heard from earlier in the committee meeting today. So we were trying to figure out a way. Is there a way we can do this to help locals who are wanting to do this? So what we had proposed was we gave a substitute or some language, I guess it was amendments, to the bill sponsor and said we would like to retain the current split level at 4. But that new language that you see in subsection 6, that came from MTA. We said if there's an ability for the locals to approve it, if they've got the requirements, the planning, et cetera, that they want to approve it, then they could go above that 4. And we thought that would help address that situation. Unfortunately, that's not what was passed. So we had a huge concern there. And as Brad stated too, this bill deals with, it's relying on land division, not on ordinance requirements. So our concern is, I would say, that under the bill, as I said, it would allow the 20 splits, but without rules or restrictions or any requirements, such as what exists in the Land Division Act or through the platting. I always say Land Division Act, I'm sorry, platting, or without the rules designed for development in that community or the site condo, you're going to have forced development or splits in communities, whether or not they're prepared for them. So one of the other things we had asked the sponsor was, if this, you have a rush then of people who want to go through land splits, it doesn't have to be approved by the community. If it's above what they're proposing, it would have to be approved by that community. And so we said, we are very concerned there's going to be a lot of local units that aren't prepared to have what's coming their way. And we need time. If this is the direction the legislature chooses to go, we need time, at least a couple years, for locals to be able to put their ordinances in place. Again, we would prefer, and our preference would be to have that split remain at 4 and allow locals to have that ability to go beyond that if that is what works in their community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And the reason is for concerns is we would like to work to address this. But we want to make it something that works for buildable lots, buildable developments, and affordable housing.
First question is from Representative Pies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just real quick then, are you saying that if you had like 4 years' time or 5 years' time, then you'd be fine with it because then the municipality would have time to review it and make ordinances? Is that just a matter of time that's your biggest
Well, our
concern?
preference, Representative, is we would like to retain that 4 split level and not have it increase to 20, and allow the locals to have that authority to go beyond that 4 if that's what works in their community. In Mr. Pink's case, Chesterfield Township was open to doing this. They literally said to him, we can't do anything because of the law, because of the platting process, and because of the site condo. So that's when we came forward and we said, okay, how can we work to get something that is workable for communities, for developers, for affordable housing? It was more when the bill was going to pass the Senate where we said, if this takes effect immediately, it is going to create some chaos in communities.
So then, at the minimum,
At the
you'd like
minimum, we
more
said
time.
you've got to allow them at least 2 years to put this in place.
Okay.
But I still think it's going to create problems in communities allowing that increase in the splits from 4 to 20.
Thank you.
Representative Hill.
The city of Marquette received notice that they were going to have 6 months to adopt new FEMA floodplain maps, which puts a sort of different timeline, but seems relevant to this conversation that they then have to look at these new maps. So I'm wondering, 24 months seems long given the housing crisis that we're suffering. 6 months has felt very quick to me on adopting a new floodplain map and the repercussions of that, which can be quite considerable for both the community and the property owner. So I'm wondering about a conversation with something, sounds like there might be something in between. I'm wondering, and also the whole question, particularly of floodplain, which is a moving target in this time. It also gets into issues that around Eagle's ability to set those floodplains, which we are discussing currently in Natural Resources Committee, and Section 31 of its ability to set its own rules. So there are, I think it would be, I'd be very interested in having further conversation on this bill. I think this is an important topic, but I just wanted to raise those issues here in this forum, bringing in that other side as well.
Yeah, no, Representative, I appreciate that. There's a lot of things that are forced on locals in which we have a very condensed time frame to try and deal with. And I think as Mr. Hollingsworth pointed out in his testimony, we need to make sure we have a comprehensive review of this. So it's more than just dividing pieces of property, the impact it's going to have in a community.
Seeing no other questions for you, Ms. Allen. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for coming forward today. I'm going to bring forward my last group who wishes to testify today. Then we do have a question for the bill's sponsor here after this testimony from Jen Ringtrink from the Michigan Municipal League, along with Tim Wolf from Lake Isabella. And you may begin when you are ready. Thank you for joining us as well. Your position is unnoted, so we're looking forward to finding out what that is.
Thank you. Jen Ringtrink with the Michigan Municipal League. Appreciate the time to be able to be here and address this issue. We are at no position No, not an official no position, but not an official position because we do want to continue to try to work on and address some of the questions and things that we think are either lacking or unintended consequences that might be created if this were to pass as is right now. I am going to pass it over to village manager from the Village of Lake Isabella, Mr. Wolf, who is one of our members and has dealt with Land Division Act as well as is the chair of our internal policy committee that handles this. So this is a bill that we have sent out to our committee and had a lot of back and forth on, and so he is here to talk about those concerns as well as his just experience in working in this issue as well.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee. As Jen said, I've been the Lake Isabella Village Manager for the last 20 years. During that time, I've worked firsthand with administering the Land Division Act, figuring out splits, awarding splits, dealing with bonus divisions, child splits, redivisions, all the intricacies that goes into the act, and it's appropriate because one of the original drafters, Jack Walker, was my neighbor too. So many years ago, Jack worked on this in '96 with the Realtors Association, but the bill before you today, I believe, would cause significant problems for local government in its current form due to, I think, a not accurate understanding of how the Land Division Act works. So in Section 2A, the 4 to 20 jump, that applies only to parent parcels. Now, if you remember March of '97, I do because I was a senior in high school, that is when a parent parcel legally was created. So any of the splits that have occurred since that time are not parent parcels under the Act. Those are considered child parcels by practitioners. So this 4 to 20 split jump would only go back to those parcels that were legally existing on March 31st of 1997. Where that becomes a problem is, I'm sure you can guess in the last 26, 27 years, a lot of those parcels have gone through divisions. And those divisions often come with language on their deed that conveys the right to make X number of splits. So when you divide property, the deed says you can make one split, no split, however many splits. This causes a problem for us in the local government community now because we are going to be tasked with tracking down who is the rightful heir to these additional 16 divisions from a parcel that existed 27 years ago. That is a burden that I don't think you want to put on local government and assessors because it will result likely in litigation, as was pointed out earlier. Because we shouldn't be the arbitrator of, you know, this parcel was 10 acres in 1997, it was split 4 times. All of those splits had the right to make 0 divisions. Who gets these other 16 divisions now for these remaining parcels? Because those aren't parent parcels under the Act. The Act is specific to what a parent parcel is, and most of the parcels you have today are not parent parcels, they're child parcels because they were created as splits out of those original parcels back in '97. Now, I also think the change in 2A is inconsistent with the proposed changes to Section 6. In that if you have a local ordinance, let's say, that has a minimum lot size of a ½ acre, how are you, the local government, going to approve something that potentially would be a ½ acre in size on a 10-acre parcel? That would be inconsistent with your zoning ordinance, and your zoning ordinance under the law requires you to not create nonconformity. So as a local government, we couldn't create ½ acre parcels on a 10-acre parcel with 20 splits if our ordinance doesn't allow a parcel that size. But the Act supersedes that in one sense. So now you have a conflict with the Zoning Enabling Act that says we can't do it because it's a nonconformity, but the Land Division Act says we have to do it because they're entitled to this number of splits. Another issue that I would look at in the Act is that the parent parcel issue is really the big one here. But when you look at how that is played out over the years, parent parcels were divided with a thing called bonus divisions as well. So as was pointed out earlier, you get X number of splits based on the size of the parcel. 4 for the first 10, 1 additional for every full 10 thereafter. So on a 40-acre parcel, you could get 7 divisions out the gate. The Act right now allows for 2 bonus divisions if either a new road is created for all the new parcels to have access on, or you retain I think 60% of the parcel as one parcel in and of itself. A simple change here would be to make that both. You could get 2 for this and you could get 2 for that. That would bump you from 9 potentially to 11 on that first 40 acres. Another thing that I would look at as a reasonable change to the act would be adding another level of division past that first child split. So the act right now says, after you create a parcel from a parent parcel, after 10 years, that parcel can be redivided again. And there's a formula in the act for how many parcels you get. And then it says after that you're done, it has to go through platting or the Site Condo Act. You know, we are 27 years out from the date of the act. It would make sense to add another 10-year cycle in there for those child parcels. So essentially create grandchildren parcels would be what it would be. And then last but not least, you know, I think the big issue on the changes to 6A, you go back to the definitions in the act. So the changes say a municipality's ordinance can dictate the size. If you look at the definitions in the Land Division Act, a municipality is listed as a city, village, or township. It is not listed as a county. How will this impact our townships in the state of Michigan who rely on county zoning? They do not have their own act to govern land use. They rely to the county. This act would call them a municipality, but they don't have the ordinance that decides what the land usage is. They've deferred that to the county. So is that going to be another issue where you have a township that relies on county zoning that's going to be forced to look at this and say, well, you know, I don't know how many splits we can do because we're not the zoning authority here. This is a county entity. You know, with that, I would happily answer any questions that you may have.
Representative Pies.
Thank you for your patience with me, Mr. Chair. So it had been mentioned earlier that oftentimes these cases needed to be taken to court. So with what you're proposing here, if these changes weren't made, do you think this is another instance then where municipalities or even those who rely on counties for their zoning could be sued? So it would be back in court again?
Absolutely. And I think it goes really back to that whole issue of a parent parcel. You know, townships especially rely on contracted employees to perform their assessing services. Those change. So you're dealing with a record handoff from one to another, and being able to go back and accurately say, this is the person who was the owner of the parent parcel in 1997, and they retained all the rights to make these splits. You know, that's a heck of a burden to put on a local unit of government sometimes. So, yeah, I think it would definitely result in more litigation.
Okay, and the MML, you're neutral, but you approve in concept?
We have no official position right now because it's the things that Tim was bringing up, some of the concerns and questions, we believe we can still work on and get to a solution that still helps everyone accomplish what we're trying to do here.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for joining us today. I do have one question for Bill sponsor Hertel. If you could come join us at the front here. And I recognize Representative Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So I just want to quickly describe the scenario in my neighborhood that I want to prevent and then ask you a couple of questions. So in my neighborhood, there was a subdivision of a subdivision, and it happened where there was not a road existing. So one of the questions is with the illustration, I'm not a civil engineer, I'm not an attorney, I'm a healthcare provider, so this is not my area of expertise. But my question is there anything in the bill that addresses how something can be bisected? Because that matters too. Where if you bisect where the driveway or where the access point would be on an existing road, maybe no problem. But if you bisected it the other way where there's not road access, and that has happened in my area. So that's my first question is there anything in the bill that addresses how the bisecting or division would go?
So the bill would just dictate how many splits that you could have. It's my understanding, and somebody else might want to chime in, who's dealt with this, because I'm a novice. I didn't do a lot of work with the Land Division Act until this bill was brought to us, and we've done quite a bit of research since then. But it would still, all the local ordinances and the zoning would still pertain to those splits, right? And so it would have to meet all those requirements. I think one thing that'd be that I want to be clear about on this bill, because I think sometimes it gets conflated into a lot of other issues. All we're talking about here is the amount of splits you can have on that piece of property. All of the local zoning and ordinances would still pertain. And sometimes I think of it in a way of what comes first, the chicken or an egg? The chicken or the egg, I'm sorry. Because right now, and I hear others who say, well, we'd rather have all these things done before we split any of these properties. But all that work essentially gets done in the process of building on that lot anyways, because you cannot en route around all of the zoning and the ordinance that would already be in place, or the communities will have time to be in place. And I just want to mention, and we did do a lot of work with the townships over in the Senate. We're trying to get to a place, we want to make sure we give the locals the runway to be able to put the necessary ordinances in place. We've looked at it, putting an effective date of a year out, a year and 6 months. We didn't know when this bill was going to pass the legislature, and so we're willing to have that conversation over here. As it moved out of the Senate, it was tough to put a date in that really made sense. But I would say, and the folks from the townships did mention this, there are townships, and I think other municipalities in the state, that are ready to do this today because they have the ordinances and the zoning in place. Chesterfield in my district is one of them. It had said, we would love to do this. It would allow more affordable housing stock, would allow to develop some of these lots that currently are very difficult to develop, but the state law doesn't allow us to do it, and that's why we brought this bill forward. So trying to get creative in that timeline and say, well, we'd give 2 years, but if a locality would like to opt out of that today, because they have the ability to do it, they need to make that decision as well. And so LSB was having a really hard time trying to figure out how to put that into legislative language. We're still working on it. But I would like to find a creative solution that says, yes, for those who need time, let's give them the time to develop these ordinances. But let's also allow those who want this in their community today the ability to do it as well.
I appreciate that. My follow-up question is, 4 to 20 seems like a big jump. So I'm curious how you arrived on the number 20.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're looking at is a law that was last updated in 1997, right? I was 12 years old, and I think we were in a different place with the growth of our state. And honestly, if you look at the governor's budget proposal, the state of the state, she spoke a lot about housing, and in her budget proposal has a big interest in increasing the building of housing across our state, which I think is something that we all should be focused on as we look to increase population and allow more affordable housing across our communities. I think this is in line with making sure that we're creating those opportunities. 20 was the number that we came up with in working with others. And honestly, it was a number that we put out there as a conversation starter. Now, nobody else has said, well, you shouldn't do 20, you should do 10. We are open to having that conversation. Unfortunately, we've had people who come forward and just said, no, we don't want to help address this problem, and you should utilize the tools that are currently there, but we've seen immense problems. I think most people would come and admit that the tools that are there today do not allow for an easy process to get to where we need to be to make sure some of these lots are buildable. So I'm open to a conversation if somebody has a different number, but that was, in our work, we thought in updating the law, it was the best place to go right now.
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, in 1997, the Lions weren't winning like they were now.
There you go.
Seeing no other questions for you, Senator, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your making your way here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With that, I just have a couple of cards to read in. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Josh Lunger with the Grand Rapids Chamber. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Dawn Crandall with the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Thank you very much for everyone's attention and thoughtful comments about Senate Bill 480 before us today. I need a motion to excuse absent members. That motion is made by Representative Burns. Seeing no objection, members are excused. And without objection, the meeting is adjourned. Seeing no further business before the committee.